Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go ahead and get started, if you don't mind, in 2 Samuel chapter 8. We've got a handout laying around, and Kay's got some more if we need some more. On the handout, we've got a map of where we're actually going to be starting tonight, kind of a nice layout of the details of of David expanding his territory. And then we got other, like 3 maps and 2 maps going up into chapter 10 on here that we'll see how far we get. What we've basically got, and if you want to break this down kind of simply, chapters 1 through 8 are kind of David expanding the kingdom, or David taking the throne, the positive thing David does. And then beginning in chapter 9, we're going to have the story about Mephibosheth, which is a great story, as you know. David keeps his covenant with of Jonathan. So that's one thing he does, keeps the covenant. The other thing that's maybe taking place, again, just speculating, is he's keeping an eye on the line of Saul. And instead of going up there and just wiping out the line of Saul, there's still rumblings, and you're going to see this, especially as we wrap up 2 Samuel, is the tribe of Benjamin and the family of Saul have not just gone under silently. They're still kind of upset. The longer David reigns, the kind of more turmoil it gets as far as they've lost the throne. And so it is the covenant of that Jonathan and David have that David is honoring. He is keeping an eye. This is typical David style of doing what's right, but yet it still is practical and has a benefit to it. It's part of his skill, part of his craftsmanship. But then the third thing is, it may be an attempt to appease the Benjamites, because, again, like I say, the tribe of Benjamin is going to rise up here at some point, because David's going to lose the kingdom to his son Absalom, and there's going to be a whole lot of people, and all of a sudden come out of the woodwork. You know, when you read chapters 1 through 8, it's like, well, everybody loves David, everybody loves David. Then after chapter 9, you've got the thing with Bathsheba, and basically chapters 10 to the end is kind of the deterioration of David's leadership, or it's the negative side of all the things that take place. And during this period right here, including Absalom's revolt, you begin to see that even if David is a popular king, once trouble sets in, there's a whole lot of people that aren't real happy. It's your typical, typical politics. You know, if someone gets elected, and as soon as they get elected, their polls ratings come down. Anyway, David's going through some very difficult times. As we finish the book up, the main thing that we're going to see here tonight is in chapter 8 here. We're going to see the kingdom expand, but then when we get into chapter 9, 10, 11, you're going to see some battles that maybe took place. Again, this is something you've got to kind of consider. Maybe took place before chapter 8. Chapter 8 may be a summary of where David ends up his territory, and then in the next few chapters maybe give you some details that actually took place that set that up. So it's not necessarily in chronological order, but again, you got to kind of read through that and think about it. So I'll pray. We'll jump in. It would be real nice to make some progress tonight, and we'll see what happens. Father, we thank you again for the chance to look into your word. We thank you for the opportunity to meet together in this country at this time in history. We do ask that our hearts would be drawn towards you, that we'd have a greater understanding of you, of your work in history, of what you expect from us and what we can see as far as your work in our own lives and in our nation. Father, we do ask that you lead and guide each one of us, that we may make an impact, that we may bring light, that we may bring truth to the people that we're involved with at this time in history. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, chapter 8, again, as I read through this, I'll refer to the map that you see right here. And this map that I've got on here is just something I drew up a long time ago. But it kind of breaks up, instead of just randomly naming names and places, it kind of shows you where they are. So here we go, chapter 8. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them, and he took Metheg-Ammah from the control of the Philistines. Now, we do not know where that's at. It could be Gath, it could be some territory, but it's something from the Philistines. And one thing to remember from this point right here, chapter 8, verse 1, we do not have any more trouble with the Philistines until the days of Hezekiah. But David is done. David, again, you've got to understand how far David has come with the Philistines. When Saul dies, the Philistines are they've occupied northern Israel. And now with David coming into power and being in power for a few years, they've completely been taken care of, and we no longer hear anything about them until the days of Hezekiah. And then realize that's 720 BC. Then by the time of Nebuchadnezzar, say 586 BC, that's when Jerusalem falls, the Philistines are gone from history. They're no longer even an issue. David also defeated the Moabites. And he made them lie down on the ground and measured them off with the length of a cord. Every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the 3rd length was allowed to live. I mean, just that means what it means. Everybody lay down. We're only going to keep 1/3 of you. 2/3 of you are going to die starting now. 1, 2, 3, you're alive. Kill, you live. 1, 2, you get up. And now they've just reduced the male population by 2/3, and these guys now can be easier controlled. That's what David did, wiping them all out. He brought them under control. That'd be the Moabites. And remember, David is related to the Moabites through his grandmother. And so, you know where they're at. You can see on the map where the Moabites are at right there. Directly. In fact, his family spent some time hiding in Moab when Saul was hunting David. So he subdues the Moabites. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought tribute. Now that's not the last time you're going to hear the word tribute. David's conquering people and they're paying tribute, meaning they're bringing taxes over. Part of their crop, part of their trade, part of their produce is brought over and given to Israel. And Israel now is profiting. He's got a little empire he's got. Just like they had to eventually pay tribute to the Assyrians or to the Babylonians, the Persians, the Jews or the people of Israel will. These people are being conquered by David and then bringing money into his economy. So things are working very well. It's quite a little business he's got. Verse 3. Moreover, David fought Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. And now if you look on the map, you can see that's going further north up there, up towards into Syria. And he's going to fight them there. Now, this is, again, just keep all these things in mind. When he went to restore his control along the Euphrates River. So the king up there in Syria had lost his control or his trade routes along the Euphrates River because David had expanded. And so now this king, of course, makes a push back to regain his territory, and David puts a stop to it. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. So, I mean, that's a large group. Obviously, he took a large portion of it. And then he hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. Again, why? Probably, again, speculating on what he's doing. If he would have allowed those to remain in operation, the chariot horses that pulled the chariot and the charioteers, that's a very formidable force. And he'd conquered them, and now to manage them, keep them manageable for him, his estate as the king, he reduced it so there's only 100 of them left. The rest of them are hamstrung. They'd still be used for, pack animals, like they could move grain. They could be used for trade in caravans, but they could not pull chariots in battle. So he basically neutralizes the military, but says we can use 100 of these. But that's something that they couldn't be stolen from him and used against him later. I mean, if he takes all of these, watch, again, he's following Deuteronomy, don't gather many of these chariots. Because you get a bunch of these chariots, and David maybe was thinking about this. He said, look how many chariots I've got. Yeah, today, but tomorrow someone's going to take them from you, and they're going to use them against you. So David says, okay, I don't need them. I'm never going to use them. I'll keep 100, but the rest of them we're going to get rid of. So anyway, he hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. And again, that was one of the great military forces of the time, was chariots. Again, notice they had chariot drivers. They were the ones that drove the chariots. They shot arrows, bows and arrows. They fought from chariots. Again, this is, in a sense, this is the Air Force. Okay, this is the greatest power of the nation was basically neutralized of the Syrians. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, you see that on the map, now the Arameans go up to help him, because they realize if he falls, we fall. Help Hadadezer, king of Zoar. David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and Arameans became subject to him and brought him tribute. So again, he makes it a garrison. In other words, he not only conquers them, he takes Israelite soldiers, puts them in a fortress up there, and says, you will now control this territory and make sure we get our tribute. He's occupying their territory. And he's moving his way up to the Euphrates River. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. Now, of course, as you read this about David, you've got the image of remember, Jesus is going to reign in his place. David is conquering the territory given to Israel. So there is some, in a sense, some prophetic value, some image of the coming Lord, of what he's going to do. But also what's interesting is, although the Lord is helping David establish a similar kingdom to when the Lord returns himself, David, as we turn to chapter 9, 10, 11, is not going to be able to maintain that because he's not the Lord. He's a mere man. Verse 7, David took the gold shields, this is interesting, that belonged to the officers of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. So there must have been some kind of a personal bodyguard. You've got to imagine that these gold shields were for decorative. They were more for parades, not for battle, because gold's not going to do very well in battle. But nonetheless, it would have been some kind of special forces that had some dress uniform that involved these gold shields. And David brought them to Jerusalem. And that was part of the plunder that he's got, that he's going to eventually hand over to Solomon. They're going to use some of it to decorate his palace, to build the temple. And it's going to be lost to the Egyptians during Rehoboam's time. And may end up, I'll just throw this out there very quickly, this gold that David collects, that Solomon collects, is taken back from Rehoboam and taken to Egypt. It may end up and may be recognized in some of the tombs of the kings, especially King Tut, because it came about that time period. And a certain amount of it was recorded in Egyptian writings. It was when Shishak took it from Israel, it's recorded that he dedicated a large amount to some of the temples, a large amount of gold, and the time periods line up. So the gold was, it may still be visible. It was transferred around in these kingdoms at this time. The gold that was taken from Solomon's kingdom when Rehoboam became king. Verse 9, when Tou, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he realizes he's in line, he sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with Tou. Joram brought with him articles of silver and gold and bronze. So there was some conflict there that David helped resolve, and so instead of going to battle against David, he just accepts him as an ally, honors him with silver and gold. So there's more gold, more silver, more bronze coming into David's kingdom. King David dedicated these articles to the Lord as he had done with the silver and gold from the nations he had subdued. So that a lot of this gold of Solomon is coming from this time. It's being dedicated to the temple. Now you can imagine how valuable the temple, the temple's not in existence yet, but it's being stored up, and it's going to be eventually be stored in the temple. These are the nations he had subdued. Edom, which as you see on the map is south of the Dead Sea. Moab, directly east of the Dead Sea. The Amorites, east of the Jordan River. The Philistines to the west, Amalek, which is over on the east side, kind of a nomadic group. He also dedicated the plunder taken from Hadadezer, son of Rehob, that's those gold shields, the king of Zobah. And David became famous, no doubt, after he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. So the Edomites had kind of creeped up into his territory. He goes down and defeats them, drives them back in the Valley of Salt, which has got to be down towards the Dead Sea, maybe on the south side of it. He put garrisons throughout Edom. So once again, he's positioning Israelite fortresses in Edom to control the people. There's an occupying force. And all the Edomites became subject to David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. So you can see on that map what we just described is basically from the border of Egypt, going all the way through Edom, up through Judah, up through Israel, along the coast, the Philistine coast, going all the way up into Syria. Now notice we don't see him doing battle with Phoenicia, which would be Lebanon today. You don't see him doing battle because he's got a treaty with him. That's Hiram, and he's trading back and forth. He's using his craftsmen to help build his palace. Solomon's going to continue with using Hiram's craftsmen to build the temple. But that continues then through Syria all the way up to the Euphrates River. David controls that. Now in verse 15, we're going to have a list. This list is going to pop up 3 different places, and it's interesting to see the positions that are mentioned here. We're going to mention the high priest. We're going to mention, let's read it. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. Very important. That's the role of the king, to do what is just, to do what is right, to bring peace in the land so that other people living in the land can do what is right, live at peace, and be just. Joab, son of Zeruiah, that's David's stepsister, Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. And Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the recorder. Now, his name is mentioned again. Obviously, that's not Jehoshaphat the king, but his name is mentioned again as the recorder. So this is interesting that all of a sudden, in the midst of having priests and having generals and having kings and all the things that go with this, we mention this man who's a recorder. He's like the secretary. He is taking records. He's keeping track of this gold. He's keeping track of these battles. Maybe a lot of this information comes from his recording. He is in charge of keeping references to all of these things. And that's interesting because it gives the impression, which was contrary to a lot of what a lot of people wanted to believe, He gives the impression of, again, a centralized government controlling a large area that's documenting trade, documenting who's going where these troops are at, how many soldiers do we have in Edom, how many are up in the fortresses up in Syria, where's everybody at, and recording this information. And so it requires, if you're just wandering around in the wilderness, like, some people want to make Israel doing this and just, random tribes, you don't need a recorder. But if you're keeping track of an empire, remember, you think about the Persian Empire. They had records. We even read them. We have them. The Babylonians, they had records, and people were keeping records of all the day-to-day activities of the king, keeping them recorded. And so here's the name of a guy. You don't know much about him, but he is mentioned again somewhere else. Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, was recorder. He kept track of these details. Zadok was a son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. These are two high priests at this time. One is Ahimelech, was the son of Abiathar, the high priest, who was killed at Nob. And then Ahimelech came running to David, joined him in the wilderness, and then he named his son after his father, Abiathar. Excuse me, I said that backwards. Abiathar was the father killed at Nob, and the son. I said that right. Okay. Anyway, Seraiah was the secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the... Now, two interesting words right here. And don't forget the name Benaiah. He's one of David's mighty men. And David's mighty men, these are the ones, the outstanding warriors, the outstanding soldiers. They've done individual battles on their own as far as fighting large numbers of people or doing heroic deeds. And he is going to become, eventually, he's going to replace Joab as the general when Solomon becomes king. But at this time in David's reign, notice this, and you can study this on your own. You can think about it. You don't have to accept what I'm about to say, but it seems this is accurate from what we can do with this. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites. Now, what are the Kerethites and the Pelethites? Now, the best guess as we put this information together, they are foreign soldiers. Now, this makes complete sense if you allow this to just kind of settle in. These are not Israelite troops. This is a private bodyguard of David, hired by David, paid by David. If David falls, they fall. You understand what's going on right here? If you have Israelite soldiers, especially the tribe of Benjamin or some other tribe, and they're faithful to their tribe, they're faithful to their people, and they're defending David the king, but all of a sudden a better offer comes along, a better politic comes along, some other king comes along, they may switch sides. But these guys, the Kerethites and the Pelethites, were brought in from a foreign country. It appears they're from Crete. It appears they're some kind of Greek soldiers. They were mercenaries hired by David. They're here for one reason, to make money, and they're making their money from who? David. They're making their livelihood from serving David. So in other words, another political party comes along, they're out. They're David's personal bodyguard. And some people even suggest, and it's logical, the word Pelethites, maybe even have it in your translations or your footnotes, that word may be Philistines. These may be some of the elite troops of the Philistines that David has hired to come over and serve him. And that would match up with the idea that they're from Crete or they're Greeks. So nonetheless, this is David's personal bodyguard that are going to go with him and protect him wherever he goes. They're not faithful to Israel. They're not faithful to the covenant of Moses. They're faithful to who? David, who has hired them as his bodyguard. And I mean, you understand the wisdom in that, especially as David's life begins to unfold. But Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were royal advisors. Now, some translations say, and it's probably maybe a more correct translation, were priests. And it's just, they might have been assisting in the priests. They might have been, what does that mean? NIV avoids the problem by just saying they were royal advisors. They're like the priests were advising him in matters. David's sons were advising him in matters. But some translations, does anybody have the word just straight out priest? Okay. And so that princes, okay.
I have chief rulers.
Okay. And so they're trying to figure out what to do with that word, because priest, it's like David's sons aren't priests. Especially when you got the high priest and the Levite. So they're trying to figure out where they're going to plug that word in. And priest is probably the best translation, but causes all kinds of problems. So we're trying to find some other way to deal with that word. So that's what that's being said. Interesting list of people. Now, the great story, chapter 9 of Mephibosheth. Now, if you go to page 2 of your notes, we got another map right here. It kind of shows you where this place is at, Lo-debar. And it's at the right place. Lo-debar is at the right place because here's the Dead Sea, Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Jerusalem where David's living. Remember when Saul and Jonathan died on Mount Gilboa, all the northern tribes fled to the east side. They fled, and the Philistines occupied this. And so where would little Mephibosheth, he was 5 years old, they would have been taking him over to this side. And that's still where it appears he's at now. He's probably, again, we're putting some things together here. He's probably about 20 years old right now. He's going to have a son. He's got a son. And he is one of the direct heirs after Ishbosheth was killed. He is the heir to Saul's throne. Now again, I don't think everybody's committed to David. Everybody's faithful to David. But you can say a lot of that just like, well, America voted for the president, and now this is our president. America has voted. It's kind of like, well, they won the election, right? But there's not unity on any presidential election. And the same thing, remember we saw all these tribes come over to David. They sent their elders down to David. Well, a lot of that was, this was their best bet. A lot of that was David had some faithful, had done a good job, and they were faithful to David. But that doesn't mean the entire tribes and all the political parties just sided with David. That meant that those that had the power went to David, leaving behind pockets of people who were still like, I never have liked David. I never have liked Judah. I never agreed with it in the first place. I thought Saul had going pretty good, except David was causing him all kinds of problems. David was always going on television saying bad things about Saul, undermining Saul's authority, and if it wasn't for David, Saul would still be alive. And so our support is still with this line of David, or line of Saul. And so here's Mephibosheth over here, and there is a power there, especially a political power, if you understand what I'm saying. So David now is going to do this right here. Here's how the story goes. And you know the story, it's a great story. David asked, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now again, I don't want to destroy the story because right here, if this is exactly what David wants to honor the covenant. That's what the word kindness, it's the word hesed. You've heard that word before from someone before, I'm sure. Hesed, it means covenant. It's a faithful covenant. It's the word translated love sometimes, but it's not love like I love you, we love everybody. It's the love, it means faithful love, it means covenant love, it means we've got a contract. I've got your back, you've got my back, we love each other. And that's the word hesed. It's what God has with Israel and David has with Jonathan, and the covenant or the hesed, the love extended to their descendants. And so David is asking right here, it's clearly talking about a covenant. Now that doesn't mean David doesn't realize this would be a good thing to do, to find someone and keep an eye on them. And it might be a good thing, especially for my political ratings, because the tribe of Benjamin lives right north up here, to show them I've got the descendant of Saul living with me in my palace from my table. I am treating the house of Saul. What are you complaining about? I've got the royal family of Saul living in my palace. I've got my eyes on them, but I'm also, and I think the underlying purpose is, I'm keeping my covenant to Jonathan. And of course, you can see the three different advantages there. One, he's keeping the covenant. Two, he's keeping an eye on the line of Saul. And three, he's showing the Benjaminites, hey, look, I'm doing the right thing. And that's typical David, doing the right thing. Showing people, I'm going to do the right thing. Remember when Joab killed Abner? He went out, he led the funeral procession. Why? So everybody can see, I'm mourning, I had nothing to do with this. I know what's right to do. So David is showing doing the right thing.
So Abner had already given that area to David?
Yes, this is later on. Yes, that would have taken place. I think if you look in your notes, I might even have some dates there on the front page. Again, yeah, right there at the very bottom. Chapter 9 begins with information concerning the remaining family of Saul. Mephibosheth was 5 when his father Jonathan and his grandfather Saul died on Mount Gilboa. So that might be when they died. Again, might be 1016 BC, and that puts that because that matches up when David took Jerusalem is usually 1005, 1004 BC, and Mephibosheth would have been 12 years old at that time. So when David comes up here and takes this, he's already got all the tribes united. So this is 8 years after David has taken, because now Mephibosheth, the 5-year-old, the 12-year-old, now he's going to have a son. So that's kind of, he's got to be, we're assuming, they would get married in their teenage years. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for him to have a son at the age of 20. Again, we start to kind of lose track of dates. But yeah, definitely, these people have all sided with David. They've been fighting with David. They've established peace with David. Okay, now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. Do not forget Ziba, Z-I-B-A. He's going to pop up later at the end of 2 Samuel. They called him to appear before David and the king and said to him, "Are you Ziba?" Your servant, he replied. Now Ziba, when it means servant, he was going to be in charge of this land. There's land up here that is occupied, controlled. It's the farmland. It's the family estate now where Mephibosheth lives. And Ziba doesn't necessarily go off and do the work, but he's like Joseph in Potiphar's house, per se. He makes sure all the servants are getting the crops planted, the crops harvested, everything's taken care of for Mephibosheth. He's Mephibosheth's Joseph. He's Mephibosheth's right-hand man. He had served Saul, and so he was faithful to the house of Saul. He was faithful to Jonathan, and now they're all gone. Ziba is still the manager of the household of Saul, and if you want to know what's going on, you're going to get Ziba, and Ziba's called down, "Are you this guy?" And he answers very appropriately, "Your servant. I'm here to serve the new king." Now, we're going to see this here. It's a great ending to this book when we find out about Ziba. "Your servant," he replied. Verse 3, the king asked, "Is there no one still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" There's your word "hesed" again. God's covenant love. The covenant love God has shown me. I've got that kind of covenant love with Jonathan's household. Can I show that to someone? Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered. Now again, there is not, but there could be some trickery and deception going on here. David could be saying, can you imagine anybody in the Bible saying, "Well, tell me where he's at. I want to go honor him too. Let me go worship him also." Who's pops in your mind? King Herod. Where's the king of the Jews? Let me go worship him too. With no intention of worshiping, he's going down to kill him, right? Well, Ziba may be thinking, yeah, right, you want to honor, you're just trying to find so there's no threat to your kingdom. But obviously we know David's not doing that. But there's still got to be that tension. Why do you really want to know? Well, I want to be nice to him. Yeah, so did Herod want to be nice to the Lord. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Amil, in Lo-debar." And you can see on the map kind of where it's at. It's up here on this side. So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, had Mephibosheth from the house of Machir, son of Amil. And that's again where the estate, Ziba would stay up here and still manage this place. As far as the finances, as far as the land, the crops, the servants. But Mephibosheth is brought. Now again, imagine, and you've heard this taught 1,000 times, but just imagine Mephibosheth, all of a sudden the royal chariots start showing up, the royal horsemen start showing up, the Secretary of State shows up, and we're taking you back to see David. It's kind of like, oh, this can't be good. And so you can see that he's going to be afraid. And we'll read on. Let's read on. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, your servant," he replied. "Don't be afraid," which would be a good statement. David said to him, "For I will surely show you kindness," hesed, "for the sake of your father Jonathan, because of our relationship, the covenant." And Jonathan would have been, if the situation would have turned differently, and Jonathan would have become king, David would have had the same claim. Hey, we've got a covenant. Where do I sit at your table? Where's my place in your kingdom? And David would be expecting Jonathan to do the same thing for him. And David's now doing it for Jonathan. David wishes he could have done it for Jonathan himself. "I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." So now Ziba's going to, anything that Saul occupied, and where's that land most likely? Where was Saul's land? In the tribe of Benjamin, which has now maybe been lost. He's now restoring this land to him. Could that be good or bad? Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" That's what he kind of wants to be. I'm a dead dog. I've got no claim to any throne. I'm nothing in the kingdom. I'm making no threat. Why would you honor me? Then the king summoned Ziba, the servant, Saul's servant, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for." So he's going to live with David. He's going to eat at David's palace, but there is going to be a royal expense. And so all that is going to come to Mephibosheth for Mephibosheth to spend as he wants and help maybe support himself there in the palace. "And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. That's his workforce. So those people are going now. They're getting land in Benjamin. They've got some land up here. They're in full force. They've got stuff to do. Then Ziba said to, let me just tell you the head of the story so you know kind of where it ends. And you probably already know. When Absalom revolts and David has to flee the country, there's a little bit of confusion between Ziba, Mephibosheth, and David, because Ziba is going to come out and apparently deceive David. So when David comes back in, it's a matter as the king returns to his kingdom, his restored kingdom, who's going to come out to meet him is like, these are the people that have been supporting him. And they want to make a good impression. And it appears Ziba, because Mephibosheth is crippled, Ziba leaves Mephibosheth and runs out and says, I've come to pay you honor. And David's going to ask him, like, well, where's Mephibosheth? Oh, he rebelled against you. He thought this was his big chance to take the kingdom back. And David gets so mad at Mephibosheth, says, I give you all of his land, all the land you've been taking care of, I give it to you, Ziba. Mephibosheth is done. I'm tired of that. I can't take any more of this revolt. You just see that tension that's been under the surface, the rebellion of the Benjamites in the house of Saul. David just crushes it. Well, then he finds Mephibosheth. Finding Mephibosheth, he gets somebody to help him get out of the house and get out to David. David says, what was this all about? He says, don't believe Ziba. He says, I couldn't move. I couldn't get out to see you. Ziba lied. So David restores it all, and he's making all these promises, and then the whole thing, you just feel the chaos in David's return. And that's all coming up. Ziba is going to eventually backstab Mephibosheth in front of David so that he can get his chance. Anyway, there we go. We can work our way through that later, but that's coming. Verse 11, then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. As if you've got a choice. He's just conquered the entire Middle East. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table, and he was crippled in both feet. And so that's his new home in Jerusalem. That's where he's going to be when we pick the story up. When there's a revolt, he doesn't do much activity because he's crippled in both feet. He's not going anywhere. Chapter 10. Now, again, this information here, it could maybe have taken place before the summary of chapter 8, or it may be after David's conquered that whole map, there may have been revolts rise up. So you can put, is that a hand? Yes.
Yeah, just one question about Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. What's that little insert refer to?
That I don't know, that he's got a son that, there's still.
It just seems like a little, there and not a.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, genealogy, everybody's keeping track of genealogies. It kind of at least tells us that the line of Saul has continued into another generation. So if there is rumblings of a revolt, I'm making this up. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. But why would that be important? Is if David is concerned about the line of Saul trying to regain its throne and the tribe of Benjamin still having someone to support for their political party, the Saul's political party, Mephibosheth has got himself in position, and he's got a son that all he's got to do is take David out, get some support from the other tribes, and he's got a son to restore the tribe of Saul's dynasty. Again, not everybody has given up on the dynasty of Saul. I mean, we have. We know the story. A lot of people have. David's pretty much clearly erased the memory of Saul, except for, you know how politics are. There's always there's an undercurrent. And so that might be nothing more than saying there's still hope for those who are against David. And we're going to see a revolt against David. You know what Absalom's going to do? Absalom's going to come. There's a whole bunch of things taking place here. But Absalom's eventually going to return from his grandfather's place here in Geshur, which is, is modern day, not modern day, but New Testament Bethsaida on the Sea of Galilee. He's going to return, and every day as the people are coming into the city, Absalom, David's son, is going to go out there and say, what are you coming to town for? What's your problem? What is your complaint? Well, we're coming to see the court. We're coming to see the king. We've got this issue. And Absalom, David's son, is going to say, well, now, let me see. If I was king, this is what I would do. Too bad. I'm not king. Not much. Good luck. Good luck even seeing David. But, I'm out here. I'm one of the men, and I'm one of the people. Next one to come by, what's your problem? Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. I agree. If I was king, here's what I would do. But, I'm not king. Too bad I'm just out here, Prince, just hanging out with the real people. I've got a job just like everybody out here, working my shift. But if I was king, and Absalom does it for several years and builds up public support until finally someone says, hey, Absalom was willing to be king, and all of a sudden everybody supports Absalom, and you can it's amazing. The whole wave of public support swings over to Absalom, who's been picking away at these disgruntled citizens who are wanting more from the king. And again, so that's all kind of, the whole political climate is still happening here. we like to read the Bible story as David took over and everybody loves David, everybody's celebrating with David, and there's unison in the land. But there's not, because soon as there's a moment for Absalom, Absalom's going to take over. He's going to crown himself king in Hebron and blare trumpets, and everybody's going to run to Absalom's support, which is, unbelievable, I think. But it happens. It's human nature. And here's the beginning. Chapter 10 is the beginning of David's undoing. This is why we have the Absalom revolt and all these things are going to take place. In the course of time, chapter 10, verse 1, the king of the Ammonites died. Now this would be Nahash. Now you've heard of him before. He's the one who, when Saul became king some 40 years ago, he'd gone up to say, I'm going to blind everyone at the Jabesh Gilead area here. And they asked Saul to come help them. Well, that king of the Ammonites finally has died. And his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash. That's the king. That's the king that began the 1 Samuel. The whole reason they wanted a king was because of this guy. Just as his father showed kindness to me. Because David and this king, they ended up with some kind of agreement. Which kind of gives the impression that these things had to take place after, remember, he just went through and killed a bunch of these people. I'll show kindness. So David went and sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. So these are royal ambassadors. They're David's best men. They're going over there with gifts. They're going over there for funerals. They're going over there for a State of the Union address. They're going over there to pay honor to him. When David's men came to the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite nobles said to Hanun, the new king, the young king, do you think David is honoring your father by sending men to you to express sympathy? Do you really think David is interested in you? Hasn't David sent them to you to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it? David's just setting the stage for his next battle. Don't trust David. So Hanun seized David's men, shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off their garments in the middle of the buttocks, and sent them away. Now, when it says shaved off half of each man's beard, it could have been, this half of the face was shaved, this half was not. It's that simple. It could be, especially in the culture, it could be they didn't cut this part of the beard and they shaved it down, so you just got this long, it would have been ridiculous looking. It could be that. But nonetheless, however they do it, it goes on and says, cut off their garments in the middle of the buttocks and sent them away. So even if they don't walk into Jerusalem like this, as they leave the royal city, they leave the State of the Union address, they leave the great ceremonies, they walk out, not privately, but probably in public humiliation with all the TV cameras and all the newspapers taking photos as these guys, these ambassadors from Israel, are mocked as they leave the land of the Ammonites. So of course they're not going to walk into Jerusalem like this with holes in their pants and their beards all messed up. But they are going to walk out of the city of the Ammonites like this with everybody watching, mocking at them. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. Do we need to say any more? The king said, stay at Jericho till your beards have grown and then come back. So they came across, they somehow made contact. It says, stay at Jericho, which is just right across there. Let your beards, so they're going to stay there for several months, and they're going to be restored. But what a humiliation. Now what would, this is such a timely piece of information, I got to be so sensitive. Because if someone took someone from David's country, David's political party, David's court, and did this to him, David's not going to say, well, I'm not sure what to do. David says, oh, I know what to do. You're not going to do that on my watch. Just imagine if these guys had their heads cut off or something. Say they're like news reporters over there and they had their heads cut off by some group. It's like, well, that's far enough. Verse 5. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, stay at Jericho, let your beards go back. When the Ammonites realized that they had become a stench in David's nostrils. Now, of course, to fear being a stench in someone's nostrils, you've got to actually fear the man who's smelling the stench. And right here, they feared David's like, oh my gosh, we've ticked David off. Oh no. They hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers. You've got a map of that on there also. If you take a look, what is it, the second map? Where is it at? I've got several maps here. It's going to be on the third page. There's several details on those pages. The humiliation of the delegates, and then you got some places. The Arameans on the bottom of the second page, you got the Arameans coming to help. So this would be people coming out of Syria, coming down to Jordan. Today it would be people coming out of Syria down to help the people of Jordan against David in Jerusalem. But it's the Arameans, which would be Syria, and then the Ammonites, which would be in the land of Jordan. And now it would be on page 3 of the maps right there, and you've got those the soldiers, the Aramean soldiers coming down to help. This is going to cause a problem. The battle lines are going to look something like this. We're over here at Rabbah. The battle lines are coming down like this. You've got the Aramean soldiers coming down here. You've got the Amorite soldiers coming here. And Joab is going to take the military this way. And he's going to have a problem because he's getting attacked on 2 fronts with some great forces. And here's we've got a great time for Joab to really kind of shine. Okay. David's, Aramean foot soldiers from Beth. Okay, I'm going to go back to verse 6. When the Ammonites realized that they had become a stench in David's nostrils, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth Rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Maacah. That's an interesting king of Maacah. That's with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob, and that's all detailed on there. That's that kingdom of Geshur right here that Absalom's going to come from. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with his entire army of fighting men. Realize they know David's mad. They know David's making military plans, so they get their force ready first. So David says, okay, we're going to not just go over there and talk to him. We're going to have to attack with full force. The Ammonites came out and drew up in the battle formations at the entrance of their city, while the Arameans of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. That's this arrow coming down here, coming out of the open country. These guys got their battle lines in front of their cities. Ammonites, everyone else from the north is coming down. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him. Joab realizes we're in trouble. So he selected some of his best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. Joab comes across here and he selects the best of the best that Israel's got and sends them up against all of these troops here. Verse 10, he put the rest of his men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and deployed them against the Ammonites. So Abishai takes the troops of Israel against the Ammonites. Joab takes the select troops and goes up against so he divides up. His brother goes this way, Joab goes this way. And again, it's a great story. We could do more with the maps and the land layout of the land. He put the rest with his brother and deployed them against the Ammonites. Verse 11. Joab says, if the Arameans are too strong for me, then you are to come and to my rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to rescue you. In other words, one of us will win, and then one of us may be falling behind, come back and help us. And we'll go both ways. Then he says, be strong, and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight. Now again, I don't like Joab because of some of the things he does, like stabbing Abner and different things like this. And David gets mad at him several times. He says, I don't have nothing to do with the sons of Zeruiah. But Joab does have some insight. Several times Joab is going to choose what is right when David chooses what is wrong. And right here, in this case right here, you can see Joab. He's not a complete degenerate right here. You see what I'm saying? He says, be strong, let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. He says, we got to be brave. We got to fight like men here. And we're fighting for our people. We're not fighting for our glory. We are the military. We are here to defend our people, and we are going to defend the cities of our God, the cities that God gave through the Mosaic covenant. We're fighting for the people. We're fighting for the land God gave us. I mean, that's some good stuff. And then he says right here, without putting God over a barrel, he says, the Lord will do what is good in his sight. That's great stuff. Right there, if people could understand that right there. We're going to do what we're called to do. We're going to defend the people. We're going to defend the city of God. And we're going to go off and do our job, which is fight in the military, in this case. Well, what's going to happen? Well, God's by faith, God's going to give us the victory. He doesn't say that. We're going to do what is right. And in the end, the Lord will do what is best. The battle is in the Lord's hand. There's no name it, claim it. There's no I'm going to pray until I get the victory. It's like, I'm going to do what's right. I know my place. And the rest is up to God. We'll find out at the end how God decides to handle it. I mean, that's a faith. There's a faith that sometimes is foreign to our culture of saying, I'm going to do what's right. We see it in 1 Peter. We're saying 1 Peter on Tuesday nights. We're going to do what's right, and we're going to cast our cares on the Lord. And what happens? Happens. We're going to try and entrust our souls to our faithful Creator. That's what Joab and Abishai go to all the troops of Israel. We're going to go do what we're called to do. What is God going to do? I can't guarantee what God's going to do. He says the Lord will do what is good in His sight. But when He does what's good in His sight, I'm going to be doing good. I'm going to be doing righteousness. Well, I like that part. Verse 13, then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, or the Syrians, and they fled before him. When the Ammonites saw the Arameans were fleeing, so here's all their help coming here. They turn around, they all head back to their home country. When these guys, the Ammonites, see that they don't have any Aramean help, they fled before Abishai and went inside the city. So now they got, these guys are gone. Abishai, they both are winning. Abishai drives the Ammonites back into their city, and this is all because they didn't accept David's ambassadors. They went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. After the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped. Hadadezer had the Arameans brought from beyond the river. They went to Halam with Shobach, the commander of the Hadadezer's army, leading them. When David was told this, he gathered all Israel and crossed the Jordan and went to Helam. So in other words, these guys are defeated. They head back up north. They get some more help. They're embarrassed. They've lost prestige. That's why you kind of wonder if these things took place before the final verses of chapter 8. You understand what I'm saying? Because David kind of settled all this already. Or it may be a revolt after. It fits either place. The events would be different. They come back down again, and David marches up now himself to go to battle against them, or sends his troops. Are we still together here? Verse 15. The Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel. They regrouped. Hadadezer, the Arameans, or the Syrians, brought from beyond the river. They went to Helam, and Shobach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, led them. When David was told this, he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and went to Helam. The Arameans formed their battle lines to meet David and fought against them. But they fled before Israel, and David killed 700 of their charioteers and 4,000 of their foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobach, the commander of the army, and he died there. When all the kings who were vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites and became subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. And that's why, you see how that's exactly where chapter 8 ends, with David having conquered that whole territory, because they kind of came back at him. So, now, we still got, down here at the city of the Ammonites, Rabbah, we've still got that problem here. These guys are all conquered, but there's still a stench right here. And they're all back in their cities. In the spring, and that's exactly what that means, in the spring, meaning when winter sets in, you've got to kind of call off the battle. It's like you can't play football all year. You can't play baseball in December. So you've got, of course you could now, we've got indoor stadiums. But they've got to come back in the winter, they've got to regroup. You know, it's not a good time to fight war, but here spring is out, it's time to go to war. And we've got to regroup, we're going to go back to war. So in the spring, which would be April, May, after the harvest, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. I mean, he's been on this big stretch up here. He's back here, maybe enjoying his peace. You can say all kinds of things here negative about David, because we're now going to go negative on David. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. Again, you've heard this preached before, but you can see when kings go to war, David stayed home. When they were over here supposed to be fighting in battle with his troops, David's in Jerusalem. And now in the evening, when it's time to go to bed, kind of quiet the day down, David's doing what? He's getting up. I mean, so he's out of sync, if you really want to stretch that. One evening, David got up. Maybe he just took an afternoon nap. Maybe it's the late afternoon nap or something. But he got up, walked around on the roof of his palace. Now, from this point right here, the pictures that we've seen, and even when we were in Israel, when we've seen that, you can see that when David's palace is high on the mound at the base of, not the base, but as Mount Moriah slopes down, he's at the top of the northern part of the city. And even when we stood on the remains of his palace, you can look over the wall. You can look down on houses that were just underneath the wall. You look down on the city. So he's up, and if he's up in his palace looking out the window, you can see all the way down the Kidron Valley. You see Mount of Olives. You see all of these things. He's looking down on his city. This is perfect. I mean, this makes complete sense. It says David he walked around on the roof of the palace, which puts it even higher because we were standing on the remains of it. From the roof he saw a woman bathing. And again, you can get all excited about this and say, well, she shouldn't be bathing on the roof. But even if you go to Israel, I remember we stayed at a monastery in Jerusalem. And when we got up from our window, we could step out and we could see, and you could look down on houses. And it's in the morning. And so these people I didn't see any naked women taking baths or anything, but I saw people getting dressed. I saw people doing laundry. I saw people, it'd be like looking in your window of your house. You know what I'm saying? And they were doing things that you normally don't do in public. And you're looking at it's like, I mean, it was crystal clear. Now, again, being a gentleman, I look away, of course. I got my binoculars and started taking pictures. No. But anyway, so you could say, well, she shouldn't be taking a bath on the roof of her, but that's probably where they took a bath, Or you can say that she's making herself available. Either way. I could teach it either way. You can see why this would be normal. He saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. I'm not going to spend a lot. I'm going to read through this, but this has been preached so many times. You could say we could just take turns preaching sermons on this. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to find her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Now this is very important because all these names pop up. Uriah is one of David's great fighters. Notice he's a Hittite. You say, well, I'm not sure if David had foreign men in his military. Well, here's one, a Hittite. Uriah the Hittite. That's what it means. Uriah, he's not an Israelite. He's a Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him and he slept with her. And again, this is the beginning of the unraveling. This sin begins to unravel in his family with the sins of his sons. He's going to lose the kingdom. It's going to continue on. Then David, he slept with her, and she had purified herself from her uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, "I'm pregnant." Now again, the problem here, there's many problems here, but the problem for David politically is Uriah's over here fighting, and she didn't get pregnant by herself. And someone's got to explain the story. Yes, ma'am?
Is she a Hittite also, or did she just marry an Israelite? Did he marry an Israelite? Do we know?
Yeah, I'm going to call her a Hittite. But I don't know if it doesn't say specifically. But because he's a Hittite, he's a great warrior that's been brought in by David, I'm going to assume he married a Hittite woman. He didn't marry an Israelite woman. It'd be kind of, I don't want to say strange or impossible, but it'd be kind of strange for an Israelite woman to marry a Hittite. But it wouldn't be strange for a Hittite to be in David's military with his Hittite wife. Now what's going to happen is now, again, as you know, if she's Hittite, that makes Solomon half Hittite. In fact, Solomon, you can do the percentages. Solomon is more pagan, or not pagan. Solomon genetically is more Gentile than he is Jewish. Because David is part Moabite through Ruth. And so David doesn't even have 100% Israel to offer into the gene pool. This is kind of interesting. So if she's Hittite, that's a good question. In the morning, David, where am I at? Verse 6. So David sent this word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, now again, we got a major battle going on over here. Uriah is one of the key players, one of the great leaders, one of the great warriors. He travels all the way across Jordan, crosses the Jordan River, goes up this long, steep trail up into Jerusalem, arrives in Jerusalem to see David because someone had carried a message over. He didn't text the message. Someone had to run a message over, and then Uriah had to come back. It's going to take several days for this all to transpire. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was and how the soldiers were and how the war was going. So, Uriah, great. How's Joab? Great. How's all the men? All right, well, good. Everybody's good. And how's the war going? What's your opinion? Is our strategy good? Okay. Well, hey, thanks. That's why I just needed some information. Thanks for coming. And then he says, go down to your house and wash your feet. Now, go down to your house, means go home. And wash your feet is, you do what you want to with it. Does anybody else have a different translation of wash your feet?
Relax.
Relax, okay. Wash your feet is an idiom for having sex. Go home, he says, hey, while you're home, he says, why don't you go on home and, have sex with your wife. Just, why not? Have a good time. He's hoping he'll do that. Again, you can study that, but wash your feet is kind of a weird, just go home and wash your feet. It refers to going home and doing this very thing. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with his master's servants and did not go down to his house. When David was told Uriah did not go home, he asked him, haven't you just come from a distance? Why didn't you go home? Haven't you been gone a long time? And Uriah, of course, said to David, the ark of Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my Lord's men are camped in open fields. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Now what's interesting right here, if you're an ark student studying the Ark of the Covenant and all the tabernacles and the tabernacle of David, we know where Joab and the Lord's army is staying in open fields outside of the city of Rabbah, right over here. But right there it says, the ark of Israel and Judah are staying in tents. Does that mean they took the ark with them? Like they did at the other battles, like when they sent it? It may be, or the ark may be here. But nonetheless, it's still, in Jerusalem, it's still in a tent. The tent of David. It's not in a tabernacle. The official tabernacle. It's not in the temple. It's in a tent here. So it's just interesting. Did they take the ark over here with them? But nonetheless, you can see the loyalty of Uriah. As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I'll send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. Oh, have another glass of wine. Another one. Hey, wait, have you tried this one? There's a great vineyard up in Samaria. Have you tried this one? And just whatever. He's just, take this, and then when the king offers you a drink, you don't say, no, king, I can't drink anymore. No. You got it. He's drinking. And sometimes that was even the custom. And whenever the king took a drink, the men took a drink. You can see that in the Persians in the fall of Babylon and stuff. So anyway, he gets him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on the mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. Even in a state of drunkenness, he's got honor enough to do what he believes to be right. In the morning, David wrote a letter. Since David has no other play here. Uriah's going to find out his wife is pregnant, and I know I was here, and I know I didn't go home, and I've got witnesses that went home. How'd she get pregnant? So David's only got one option. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote. Now remember, when they write a letter, he said, this is a letter for your commander. He'd write it on some kind of, papyrus, not papyrus, they didn't have papyrus yet. It'd be some kind of parchment, apparently. And they would be rolled up. And it would be sealed. And we've got remains. They have found the actual seals. They're called bullae today. They put a piece of wax right here, or clay, and press it with some kind of seal, a signet ring or something, and it'd seal it. So the only person that can open it is who it's addressed to. So Uriah's going to have a letter. He's not going to have it and read it halfway there. It's going to be sealed by the king, which is a major offense to break open a sealed document. So he's going to seal it, and in the letter that is sealed by the king for only Joab's eyes only, it says this right here. In verse 15, in it was wrote, put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is the fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he'll be struck down and die. In other words, we're going to attack the front gate, and then all of a sudden, with Uriah leading the charge, and he's up there in the midst of the battle, blow your retreat trumpet, and everybody's going to retreat, and Uriah's going to be running with his back, and surely he's going to get killed. Okay. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. You got to think Joab's not a dummy. Well, this is a great idea. He realized this is a death wish. It's like, I'm not sure what you did, Uriah, but you made David mad. But he doesn't say anything, because it's sealed documents. Like, well, whatever happened in Jerusalem the last couple of days didn't go very well. So you're going to be leading the attack on the gate. Go get him. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite was dead. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. Remember the scribes, the accountants, those are the recorders. They're bringing this information, getting an update all the time. He instructed the messenger. He said, this is important, watch this. He says, he instructed the messenger, when you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, because what you're going to tell him happened is completely stupid. I mean, it was a bad idea, it was a bad attack, a bad place, the wrong time of day. He's going to get ticked. I mean, David knows military. I mean, he's the quarterback. He knows a good play and he knows a bad play. That was a dumb call. So his anger is going to flare up, and he may ask you, why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would be shooting arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbesheth, or Jerubbaal? Remember when they attacked the Jeroboam, or Gideon's son, attacked the city? The woman dumped the grinding stone on his head and killed him. Remember that story from the book of Judges? David's he says he's going to recount all this military strategy, all these things we've covered in school. Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died in Tebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then you say to him, also your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. So when you get done giving him this dumb report, his anger is going to flare up. He's going to ask you 1,000 questions. Weren't you paying attention in class? He says when he subsides, then tell him Uriah is dead. The messenger, now watch how the messenger tells the story. So now how would you, if that's what Joab tells you, what are you going to say first? You going to tell him all the dumb stuff? What's going to be the first thing to come out of your mouth? Well, let's see what's it. The messenger set out, and when he had arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. It's like, I'm not going to take a breath. It's like, and Uriah the Hittite is dead. And watch David. After hearing that stupid report, that's enough that everybody knows is going to make David the king angry. Who's leading this battle? Who's in charge out there? David becomes very understanding. David told the messenger, say this to Joab. Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. I'm sure he's having a tough time with this loss. But, we just got to admit, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Now, doesn't that something a great coach says at the end of a game? Guys, we've played hard out there, but who knows who's going to win? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Just don't be discouraged that we lost this game. You don't get a second season you coach like that. Okay, but anyway, David, you can see what David's doing. When Uriah's wife heard her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. And again, that's the first time you've read those words. David has gone through a lot of tests. Now, I'll sum up with this. You never heard the Lord be displeased with David when David was fighting in the wilderness. David was always rise up and he'd always do what was righteous. In the midst of confrontation, in the midst of difficulty, David could hold himself together. But the tide has changed. David is no longer in the midst of turmoil. David is in the midst of peace. David is winning battles. David is famous. David is successful. David has everything at his beckoning call. David is in control. It is at this time David falters. Some people falter in times of difficulty. Some people falter in times of success. David never broke stride with the Lord in times of difficulty. It's now he takes his eye off the ball. He lets go during a time of success. And now it says for the first time we see, and the thing that David did displeased the Lord, which means we got judgment coming. And so that's where we're going to pick that up the next week. Thank you for listening. There's a lot of information there, and I'm just kind of trying to fly through it. So I appreciate your patience. Father, we come to you today, and we do thank you again for these stories, these examples. We thank you that you are observing us, that you are watching us, and that you've revealed it to us, that the things that we do can please you, but also the things that we do can displease you. Father, we ask that we may be given strength by your Spirit, encouragement through your word, and guidance through your word to do the things that are right. And we thank you for the grace you've given to us, that we may continue to grow and progress in your will. Father, we ask that we may do the things that you've called us to at this time in history. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for your patience.